a guided self-meditation, self-compassion practice. So you're very welcome to stay on for that after the session closes. We'll just keep it open. So this conference is organized by the Foundation for Developing Compassion Wisdom, FDCW, which is a nonprofit dedicating to creating a more compassionate world. And my name is Victoria Coleman, and I serve as the Executive Director of FDCW. We were inspired by our patron, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who so often emphasizes the importance of teaching values to our children. His Holiness is a strong advocate for secular ethics and the practice of the good heart. So what does this mean? In essence, I think it's about caring for one another and feeling a compassionate attitude towards yourself, your family, friends, colleagues, animals, and in fact, all beings who are sharing our planet. So many of the sufferings and challenges and problems we see in today's modern world are man-made, and we can solve these as long as we start to cultivate values that nurture us and our world. We are human beings who need affection and love to survive and to thrive. So by nurturing a sense of caring for ourselves and for others, we can grow and solve these multiple crises that we see all around us. At this point, I'd just like to mention Dreamers Home, which is a non-profit partner that FDCW has in Israel. Over the past 3 years, Dreamers Home has been introducing the 16 guidelines tools to people in Israel in both Hebrew and also in Arabic. They recently began a 16 guidelines program with a local partner organization located next to the Gaza Strip. And they have a strong program teaching 16 guidelines in 10 schools throughout the south of Tel Aviv. Maybe we can just take a moment to send our thoughts and our prayers and our love to those at Dreamers Home, their families, friends, and all the people in Gaza and Israel right now during this terrible and frightening time. So turning to why we decided to run this conference, bit of background. Before summer, we sent a message out to our global community, asking people to present during our conference and sharing what we thought it would be about. And we received so many responses from around the world. We learned about different ways educators have found to bring compassion and values to children and young people in their countries. It was really heartening and inspiring to see what's happening all over the world. I was completely unaware about the breadth of the activity and the diverse ways people had found to bring these values to children. So we wanted to harness and share that inspiring energy and those activities, but also to make it very practical. So we asked each of the presenters to include a practical exercise or a guided meditation during their speaking slot. And the theme for today's session is inspired by His Holiness, who said, survival of humanity depends on educating the hearts of children. And I'm delighted that today we have joining us 3 highly experienced educators who have been active in the field of universal education for decades. Our first speaker is Pam Cayton, who's worked in universal education for over 20 years. She founded the Tara Redwood School in Santa Cruz, California, and lived many years in Nepal. She then came to live in the United States and found that schools there did not focus enough on teaching the whole child. The focus seemed to be purely on academic subjects. Inspired by Lama Yeshe's ideas about universal education, Pam developed a new way of teaching that combines the best of Western and Eastern philosophies. She wrote a book called Compassion in Education and started the Creating Compassionate Cultures Institute. Since 2007, Pam has been running workshops and trainings on her unique curriculum And in 2012, she set up a non-profit organization, Creating Compassionate Cultures, to spread her education program to children all over the world. So thank you, Pam, for joining us today. I'm so much looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Over to you.
Thank you, Victoria. You have to excuse me, I have a little bit of a residue of a cold, so I might clear my throat quite often. Very happy to be here. And for all of you who have put aside time to join this, this whole series around developing compassion, how to raise compassionate children, you know, I thank you. Because I think, as His Holiness says, to quote His Holiness Dalai Lama again, love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. And so I think when we reflect on that and the challenges that we are faced with at this time in history, there's never been a time quite like this. You know, we know that the environment, just to quote an ecological psychologist and developmental psychologist, Uwe Bronfenbrenner, he's actually Russian originally, and he talked about these different spheres in our life that impact us and the development of the child. And we really definitely see that everything we experience in our lives, in every moment, actually is having an impact to varying degrees on the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world around us. And to Uwe Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory posts that individuals' development is influenced by a series of interconnected environmental systems, ranging from our immediate surroundings and out to, you know, eventually out to the society we're raised in and the politics in our country and beyond, and the world. And now we live in a very closely interconnected world, particularly because of technology, which we all depend upon. Look at us now, right? So it's become such a part of our lives, and it's in everybody's home. It's in the children's pockets. It's everywhere we go, right? There's technology. Now, there's the great things about technology, and then there's, of course, a little bit of the downside is how do we start to decide, you know, how much time we need for our inner world versus that outer world that we're just constantly being bombarded with information. There was some research done that said that came up with between 99, this is quite an old research, it's changed tremendously, but between 99 and 2002, the information, you know, in the world was as much or maybe surpassed even what had the information since beginning of history, recorded history. So that's how fast now it's changing, extremely much faster than that even. So what do we do about that? Because all of that is having an impact on the child. And I think this way, and on the adults who are guiding the children. And are they guiding the children? So what I found when I first moved from Nepal, where I lived for 10 years and worked with the children there, bringing Western education, was when I moved to the edge of Silicon Valley in California in 1988. I really saw the difference in the impact that the different cultures and societies were having on the development of the children. One of the things that I really noted was that definitely there was a lack of focus on the inner development of the child and nurturing those inner qualities. And I noticed that children were also given a lot of power. The parents really pretty much just, you know, I think a swing from definitely the baby boomer era where, you know, you do what I say because I said so, to really giving them pretty much free rein. But what was missing was the guidance from the parent and seeing themselves that, you know, it's our job as parents and educators to really help to guide the children, you know, and help them to focus on those, what we call now in education, soft skills, the inner development, We know if things aren't going right on the inside, they won't go right on the outside. And yet it's pretty much, education doesn't give the time to that development. So how to do this? I could see there was a great need for it, but I didn't know how to do it. We started at that time with really focusing on empathy. One of the things I saw was, through this focus on the me focus and parents really giving a lot of power to their children. On the one hand, could be a good thing. On the other hand, if too extreme, they weren't getting the guidance they needed. So they were in charge, and having that amount of power really, without the guidance, children would have a lot of meltdowns, a lot of tantrums if they didn't get what they wanted. And so I wanted to somehow, try to figure out how to guide the children to sort of want to be kind, to light that spark, of kindness that I believe and come from that perspective of this innate goodness that we're all born with. At that time, developmental psychologists were saying, really, the children couldn't really develop empathy until they were about 6 or 7. And that didn't sound right to me. So, we started by really just talking about, like, asking questions. I knew it wasn't filling empty pots. It was rather awakening from the side of the child, that interest. So ask that question, which is one of the first questions that children start to ask at about 2 years old, is why? Start to ask them why. Why be kind, right? Why be kind? And what? And how? How do you think this, this little piggy in the story, how do you think he feels in this story? Any story, any book you pick up, if you open a conversation and ask questions, the children can actually go there. We know now that metacognition, the ability to think about thought, develops, even before 2 years old. I mean, that's very powerful. Children have, the ability to think about quite sophisticated concepts and about themselves before what's happening on the inside. They have that ability. But if we don't ask the questions, there's a lot to distract them from going inside. There's a lot to distract them. It's a very busy world we live in. And so we started there with empathy, and we saw that children very quickly, that little spark of awareness. Yes, what does this, what happens? How does he feel if you don't share the ball with him? How does that feel? So ask them about their feelings, look at their face, see what they're feeling. Children know they can go there quite easily. And so that's where we started. It was very practical, very practical. And it was our own personal research. And we started to see that what the developmental psychologists were saying didn't seem to be true, that we were able to awaken that empathy. Now, there's some research that shows we're actually born with a natural empathy. Some call it, it's a little bit different, sympathy, which is different from empathy. Empathy is more about where you can relate to another person's feelings. You become, you share in their feelings. So that's where we started. And the other thing that I realized, is this sort of lack of appreciation for things. So we also went into a very simple approach where we talked about production, interconnection. Where do things come from? And children young, really, as soon as they can talk, they can tell you, and they start to explore, well, where does your snack come from? Oh, it comes from my mom. Oh, well, where did your mom get that from? What is it? You've got crackers. Where do they come from? And so on. And so they can trace it back with absolutely everything because it's the nature of the way things exist. So in the beginning, we started this way with empathy, interconnection, and we'd go into the different classrooms with little lessons on, generosity, on kindness, on patience. But then I started to realize, and it's like what Lama talked about with his concept of universal education, which is what really inspired me to start the school, was that things do exist interconnectedly, present these things in a holistic way. Every subject contains the essence of science, of psychology, that we need to put it all together and present it all together. And I used to think about this a lot. How do I do that? And then I realized, well, if children, you can teach children from many different perspectives, but if you teach them from the perspective of the way things actually exist, then what starts to happen, right, is that what arises from understanding, in essence, everybody wants to be happy. How do we create that happiness? How do we find it? Do we find it from the external world? Everything's interconnected, that all our happiness actually comes from others, but in essence, it's always within us, right? How to tap into that innate goodness and that happiness that we find within ourselves, right? We can always come back to that once we learn how to tap into it. So interconnection was a very important one for us too. So if we teach from the perspective of the way things exist, what naturally will arise are attitudes like, appreciation, kindness, right? Because what children really want to know is the why. If a child understands why, then then they'll accept it. They want to know why. They start asking why, as soon as they find words, 2 years old, 18 months, 2 years old. Why? They're curious. So it's to guide them to understand and to ask them why about these things. So we started by really developing this program to bring into the school on a daily basis, to create a curriculum and a framework for curriculum that would approach all the subjects in an integrated way, because that's the way things exist. Nothing exists independently, right? So to present things in that way, to ask questions that awaken that understanding. And then what starts to arise are these qualities through connecting with an inner wisdom. Okay. So we started with the question of what kind of a classroom do you really want to come to each day? Do you want to come to a classroom where, the kids are saying, no, you can't be my friend. No, I don't want to play with you. Or do you want to come to a classroom where kids are saying, sure, come and play. You could be my friend. Yes, I'm everybody's friend. And it's very clear. That's like a child can go there. They all have that experience, right? Of wanting to be cared for, wanting to be liked, wanting to be loved. It's a basic kind of human need, right? And so we started with that. And what came from these children as young as like 2, 3 years old were things like hugs, friends, kindness, sharing. And so these things we represent, the children create, artwork and the words that they really want to create in their classroom, and that goes up there as their wish for the classroom. But then you have to think, okay, how are we going to make that happen, right? How can we make all of those wonderful things? Anybody got a magic wand? Does it happen by magic? How do we make it happen? Do we wait for everybody else to do it first, right? So it's logic-based. Children love logic. They like to know the why, and they like to try to figure things out, not be told, but asked. And so then how do we make it happen? Well, if we wait for everybody else, what if they don't do it? Will that happen? Not necessarily. Then usually, you have children coming and saying, hey, teacher, she's not doing it or he's not doing it. But what about if we start doing it? What about if we just start doing it? What do you think? So they become researchers. Children become researchers, right? And they love to try to trick that research too, prove that it's not right. All the better, let them use that mind, that logical thinking, that critical thinking. And we know now that children as young as 2 years old, metacognition actually supports the development of critical thinking. Critical thinking is one of the 4 most important skills for the 21st century. This research came out of Stanford from Linda Darling Hammond, the beginning of this new millennium, that there are 4 major C's that are required for the skills that are needed for this new century, this new world that we live in that is changing so rapidly. Okay, so the 4 C's, we added an extra one, compassion. The others were critical thinking, collaboration, working with others, because we're a very tightly interconnected world now. We need to know how to collaborate anyway, even within our own homes. Creativity, thinking outside the box, not just rote memorization and repeating what we've heard. Creativity, right? And communication. So the communication is, of course, again, another one that's extremely important, as we know. But to have compassion has to be there. And somehow they missed that one. But we got that in there. So we have those 5 C's that we really bring, and that's the way we approach our education. So, so critical thinking is important. And when the children really think about what it is that they want to create, how are they going to create it? So then they say, okay, let's see. Well, I guess so. If we all do things, if we just, start doing it. And so that taps into the age-old golden rule. And golden rule, of course, in essence, is practiced throughout the world in all the different major religions. The golden rule, treating others as they would like to be treated, right? So from there, it's like not only having the wish and the intention of what we really want to create, but how are we going to do it? It takes action, right? And so certain actions are going to lead to the kind of results we want, right? And every action, it actually is the way that things exist. Things exist in an interconnected way. That is the way things exist, right? But they all come from, all action comes from thought, right? Our actions first come from thought, intention. But a lot of the time that thought, we're not even aware of it. It just happens. It's just, we're moving through our life. We're moving through our day, right? So the more aware we become of the intention and what it is that we really want to create with our day, in our classroom, in our home, in our workplace, the more we become aware of that, then the easier it is to be able to create it. There's a hope that we can create it, right? That mindful intention is what we call it. So the children set the intention every morning, different ways. Every classroom the children take it in turns to set their morning intention. And so there's a lot of different ways that we do that. We use a ball that we call the mandala ball. Mandala represents that interconnected nature of all things, and we are part of a mandala, the classroom mandala, the country or the county, state, country, continent, world mandala, all the way out to the universe. All right. So we start by using these items that actually represent our wish, our intention for the day. And then because we have this, humans generally have this bias towards what's not right. We focus on what's not right rather than what is right, what is good. So we have what we call the kindness detectives. And the kindness detectives are we're normally with detective, of course, we're looking for who's making the mistakes. Here we try to transform the way that children look at the world and themselves, right? That's empowering, and they look at what is right. And they are acknowledged for what they do that people notice is making this magic happen in the classroom. So those kindness detectives are represented by different things depending on what their thematic study is. So we do create, we do study thematically, which is the way that things exist interconnectedly. And so they'll have objects, we have items that represent those positive qualities we've seen our friends practicing throughout the day. And it's a reminder and a little bit of, gives inspiration to keep on going and connects with that little even dopamine effect of, wow, look at all those stars that we collected, these positive qualities, and being recognized for the positive rather than the negative. So there's so much I could say on this. And I know I'm running out of time. So at this juncture, let's have a little reflection. I also see that, of course, as I said, that parents play a very important role. And I think parents got a little confused there as to how much guidance they should offer their children and how much freedom. But without the guidance, actually, is it real freedom? It seemed to me like what escalated, looking after the me first, was actually a lot of issues, a lot of problems, and a lot of hard emotions to deal with. So children want to know they're safe. And it's our job as teachers, educators, and parents to provide very clear boundaries and very clear guidance to our children. They look for that. They want to be held by that. It's a secure feeling. And we know also from research that secure attachment that children can trust and depend upon, at least one person in their life actually helps them to have more resiliency, to be more resilient, to be kinder, more empathetic, because they feel safe, they feel held. It's very important for parents to actually have that, not as the authoritarian, but as a guide. Okay. So we do work with the parents as well. It's very important that we have that bridge between school and home, and that we are guiding our children and keeping them safe, within the school environment, but also at home, and that we're reinforcing all those positive innate qualities that we have, this innate goodness. So we come from that perspective. We're not putting goodness into the children and these qualities into the children. We're awakening that, innate goodness. So let's reflect for a moment on what the children, when they come to school, what they reflect on, the kind of classroom they want to create. And, at home, parents reflect on what are the qualities that they really want to create in their home to guide their children to nurture in themselves and the children. So let's have a moment on that one. Okay, and I'll guide you with it. So sitting comfortably, when I ring the little gong, we use gongs throughout the day at the school as well. And that's where we take a moment to sort of start with the breath, get anchored with the breath, and then have a reflection very often, or maybe just to recenter. So sitting comfortably, eyes closed. And when we do this, we can do it if you do in Tara, and we have a nice stretch. We breathe in, hands above the head, breathe out. So let's do it the Tara way when I ring the gong, okay? Nice stretch up, deep breath in. Breathing out, and as we bring our hands past our eyes, it's like closing the shutters. And hands to the heart. Take another breath in and out. And again, breathing in all the way down to your tummy. And breathe out through your nose or your mouth, whichever is most comfortable. And hands in your lap. And continue to focus on your breath. Entering through your nose, down to your tummy, and back out again. And if your mind wanders, gently bring it back to the breath. So let's take a moment to think about our home, your home. And if you have children, the children in your home, your partner, your animals, yourself. What kind of qualities do you really want to bring in to your home? What are the qualities that you most value for all those who are part of your home environment? How does it feel when you think about those qualities actually being strengthened and developed and coming to life in your home? How does it feel? Now you might want to just choose 5 qualities that you want to write down to remember, or just remember, keep in your mind. And you might want to write them down, put them on the wall at home or in a little peace corner. We create peace corners in our school and in our homes, just so that you can remember, call each day as you set your intention for the day. And then you will be creating compassionate cultures.
Thank you so much, Pam. I was actually waiting for the gong. You don't do one at the end, I guess.
I did one.
Oh, did you?
I was a little quiet.
Thank
Sorry.
you. If you have
Thanks,
questions,
Victoria.
if you have questions for Pam, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them during the discussion panel. So can I move on to our next speaker now? I will introduce him. This is Andy Wistreich, who is a retired drama teacher and education manager. He first became involved with universal education 40 years ago. He was a Buddhist teacher until recently and has continually endeavored to make teachings and meditations on compassion, wisdom relevant and accessible by using dialogical approaches. So welcome, Andy, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what he has to share today. So over to you, Andy. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Victoria. Thank you, Pam, for that lovely talk, giving us an insight into your school. Survival of humanity depends on educating the hearts of children. So I'm going to lead a meditation, and it's hopefully going to take us into the first part of the title, which is Survival of Humanity. And we'll spend about 10 minutes on this. So could you actually take a meditation posture. That would be helpful. Sit firmly on your seat. If you're on a chair, feet flat on the ground. Feeling the earth beneath, the sky above, and the space around. And bring your mind within your heart space, the space within your rib cage. Bring it down from your head, if that's where it's been. And in your heart space, which you can expand if it doesn't feel big enough, just feel the energies that are moving there. Connected with emotions. And thereby bring your awareness into the present moment. Just being with these energies as they move around in your heart space. Give them plenty of room, don't restrict them. Just be with them. And from here, connect with our Mother Earth. The source of all life on this planet. Not just beneath us, but all around us. The air we breathe is part of her atmosphere. Extending right up into the sky above us. And in the space around us, not just of the room we're in, but beyond the building. If you're in a city, beyond the city, reaching out to the mountains, the rivers, the oceans. And feel I am part of life on earth. So we're not looking at it. We're connecting with a part of ourselves. And feel gratitude to Mother Earth over billions of years, having created the conditions for this life, which we now enjoy. Bringing your awareness back to your heart space if you've left it. This life hasn't all been enjoyment. Even now, connect with one's own suffering, with tenderness. In the heart space. with the energies, some of which may be a little painful. And allow the heart space to expand. Including others, not just humans, other species, other life forms, trees, plants, the soil, the rock, the rivers, clouds, and allow your heart space to become so big that it holds the whole earth. We're truly part of all of life on earth. We're connected. In the heart space, feel the connection with all living beings. Being aware of their suffering. Of many kinds. Even in one situation mentioned earlier, the new war in Gaza. There's the suffering of dying, of loss, fear, and then there's the suffering of anger. Can you hold this? This is just one example of the suffering on our dear planet Earth. And there are many factors such that it's been called a polycrisis that we're living through. The climate, ecological breakdown, the economy with its incredible gross inequalities, political enmities, division, power hunger, and the impact globally of all these difficulties, generating trauma upon trauma in our time, including in the hearts of children across the world, displaced, in refugee camps, in violent households, and so forth. we humans are not fully addressing the challenges of our times. So the very survival of humanity is actually threatened. And within our own heart space, feel it now. Many different emotions can arise. Grief, rage, compassion. We're participants. We are not separate. We cannot hide. We're here now. And we are doing what we can to contribute something positive. And so within the heart space, feel some joy. It might be quite small, but it's there. As I'm sure you're aware, there is a lot of discussion these days, asking the question, what are the roots of the crisis? Because collectively, we have to do something. And unless we get to the roots, it's just going to be temporary. And so really that's what brings us here today, it seems to me, is to go deep to the roots. And I think about this a lot, and I go through lots of different answers to that question, what are the roots of the crisis? And I think there are many answers. And probably many of the answers are all interconnected, actually. The one I want to go to in this short session is modernity's culture of separation. Modernity's culture of separation between humans and the earth, and between humans and life in general, and between individuals with each other. And when we talk about modernity, we usually locate the beginnings in the 18th century in Europe, Cartesian dualism. But, you know, they could justify that on the basis of, you know, in the book of Genesis in the Bible, where God said, you have dominion over the earth and the animals to humans. Isn't that part of the root of the crisis? That we've tried to control, extract. As if we're separate. We're not part of it. It's out there. It's a resource for us to use. We even talk about human resources. in large organizations? Is each of us just a resource? What does that mean? But this session is also about children, the hearts of children. And I just want to share a photograph, just look at this for a little while. This child is 5 months old. And while you look, just think about this phrase, educating the hearts of children. What does it mean in relation to this child? You can feel the answer in your heart, maybe. But we're going to leave him now. I brought that up because I was looking at that photo earlier and I thought, I'm not sure I want to educate the heart of this child. I think I just want it to be allowed to flourish. It's already there. And I think that's something that we need to ponder if we're educators or parents, or in my case, a grandparent. Because often education is about doing something to children. I was at a conference last weekend about localization and the planet, and somebody said, education is the biggest crime against humanity. Quite provocative. I kind of know what they meant. I think it's an extreme, terribly extreme thing to say, obviously. But it does behove us to really think about. Because one of the things about the culture that we live in is that it's colonizing the minds of children in a certain way with a kind of doctrine of individualism, materialism. You know, if it's not material, doesn't really exist, or it's secondary, it's a kind of product. Competition or competitiveness is a large part of most education. I'm not saying there isn't room for competition, but obviously, well, maybe obviously to me, it should be secondary to cooperation and collaboration. Just think about your own education. Weren't you encouraged to compete with the others in your class, whether it's on the sports field, in the examinations, being a good child, behavior, all kinds of ways to please the teacher, or think about your family, to please your parents. Did you have to compete? You're even taught to compete with yourself. What does that mean? It's preparing us for a world that we now inhabit. A world which is quite dominated by consumerism. Happiness comes from the more things you have. And commodifying the self. Think about social media. making yourself into some kind of commodity to flaunt to your friends. And a complete sort of bewilderment about ethics, because there's so many different pressures and forces at work on young people, let alone all the rest of us. It's a very confusing world, as Pam was saying. And recently I heard an interview with an indigenous community leader from Mexico who talked about how they scrapped the schools and they allowed the children to learn according to their curiosity. I was very inspired by that. He had been a friend of Ivan Illich, who was the de-schooler in the 60s and 70s. So it was based on an ideology. Natural curiosity and creativity can be a source of all learning, given an environment, support, encouragement. The theories of Vygotsky, the Russian educator, you know, of just learning by being near adults who are active and engaged in some activity which you're interested in. I have a 10-year-old niece who's been diagnosed as neurodivergent, and just in a conversation, she just described her school as a prison. I found that very distressing. She just doesn't want to go to school, and she's not alone. And, you know, many different kinds of children are really averse to school because it is like a prison for them, where you learn various curricula which are nothing to do with curiosity or creativity. They're more to do with obedience, fitting in, behaving in a certain way. So from this, I come to the conclusion that rebellion against modern culture is healthy. And so when we see that in children, I think it's something that we need to really understand and respect. Whereas so often it's being put down, isn't it? So this maybe calls into question the whole relationship to the global society. Is rage a valid emotion in the face of what's going on? Can rage be transformed into what Neff calls fierce compassion, which is a source of activism, for instance? Or when I say activism, I don't mean any specific type of activism. I just mean being active in the world to try to bring about a better world. So I'm personally interested in developing community leaders for social transformation and a future eco-civilization. And this is kind of coming from an analysis of the current situation and feeling that we're actually in the process of, the word collapse is a bit extreme, but some kind of disintegration. And that really, for the survival of humanity, which is part of the title of this session, educating the hearts of children means to empower their authentic courage, determination, strength, their capacity to become the community leaders, in whatever sense that might be interpreted according to their personality, their situation, and so forth. And so for me, it's about certain stages, specific skills that kids need for this world that we're in. Caring for others. Resourcing their inner resilience. Learning to communicate with emotional and spiritual intelligence. Respecting others, respecting Mother Earth. I think that there will be a survival of humanity. In that respect, I guess I'm on the optimistic end of the spectrum. I do think the hearts of children contain the seeds of the solutions. And I think it's our role as educators and concerned adults and parents and so forth to enable those hearts to flourish in relation to their community. I'm going to stop there. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Andy. Very moving. Maybe we can just take a moment to stretch or move. And we've been sitting for about an hour now, so maybe take a glass of water, move around, let the body have a little bit of a stretch before we move into our next part of our session. Our third speaker this evening is Venerable Connie Miller, and she is the current president of the Associazione Educazione Etica Emotiva e Sociale in Italy, an organization which since 2019 has been dedicated to bringing the innovative program inspired by the Dalai Lama, which is social, emotional, ethical learning, into Italian schools. Venerable Connie has been an ordained Buddhist nun since 1978. She researches, develops, and teaches new and creative learning programs for adults and adolescents. She also develops training programs for teachers and educators. She's devoted her adult life searching for ways to blend pedagogical and psychological approaches of East and West in modern education. She encourages the exploration of themes such as ethical behavior, development of the whole person in all aspects, emotional, cognitive, social, and so on, by using contemplative and interdisciplinary pedagogical methods. So I'm delighted to welcome Venerable Connie today, and thank you so much for joining us. Please, Venerable Connie, over to you.
I'll unmute myself. Thank you very much, Victoria. Thank you, Andy, for the practice and the lovely words, and thank you, Pam, as well. Actually, I was just thinking as I was listening to both of you, I was remembering inviting Pam to Italy, and she led us in a wonderful workshop on creating compassionate cultures for quite a few people here in Italy, and it was a fantastic experience. And one of the first things that Pam started with that has always just it's sort of like got stamped on my brain, I suppose one could say, is that we are all teachers in every moment. We are always teaching. Whatever we're doing, we're transmitting something to the person in front of us. We're also transmitting something to ourselves. And in some ways, that is teaching. That is modeling. That is having an impact on others, certainly, as well as ourselves. And so what I'd like to do with my time today is I'd like to first start with what I'm going with a practice that we do in Sea Learning, which is a grounding practice as well. It's related to resiliency practices based on the new science of trauma. I say new because not just because it's become sort of popular, which is not necessarily a particularly good thing with many things in our world, but also because there are new insights in this field. And this is one of the elements that is incorporated into the approach of Sea Learning. So I'd just like to very kindly invite you to find a comfortable position for your body. We all have different bodies, and what's comfortable for one may not be comfortable for another. But find yourself a position in which you can be comfortable. If possible, you can kind of express your dignity through the position of your body, and find a position also in which you feel kind of stable, not insecure physically. And then just let yourself feel for a moment in your body. Feel the air on your skin. Perhaps feel the touch of your clothing on your skin. Feel whatever sensations arise. You can shift your attention as a particular sensation becomes predominant and another becomes less so. Just let yourself feel your body. Through your sensations. And you might take note how you're perceiving those sensations. Perhaps you're perceiving some as pleasant. And that's okay, just let them be as they are. You might be perceiving sensations, some others as neutral, and others still perhaps as unpleasant. Just let yourself feel them. It's not necessary to do anything about them. Just let them arise and remain if they do so. Just as they are. And I'm going to gradually invite you to shift your attention when you feel comfortable to your body's points of contact. Your buttocks on the chair, for example, your feet on the ground, perhaps your hands resting in your lap or on your legs. And from inside your body, get in touch with those sensations at these points of contact. Allow your body to just settle. Let gravity do its thing. If your mind wanders elsewhere, it's not a big deal. Just take note and gently bring your attention back to where your body is resting. Perhaps you feel a sense of being rooted, being supported. That you can just let your body settle, let go, without fear of falling. A sense of groundedness. And take a moment to kind of open your awareness just a tad and notice, how are you feeling inside in this moment? How does your body feel in this moment right now? How does your mind feel? How does your heart feel in this moment? Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you for diving into this practice. I'm here to talk to you a bit about sea learning and my experience of bringing sea learning to Italy. So I'm going to just tell you a little story, first of all, because, you know, for if given the group of folks that I see, including many old friends, many of us have been following His Holiness forever and hearing His Holiness talk for a long time about the need for a transformation in education, for, you know, the need for education to not only, you know, train the mind, but also, as we started, educate the heart, you know. And one of His Holiness's quotes about that is, I look forward to a day when children, as a result of integrating the principles of nonviolence and peaceful conflict resolution at school, will be more aware of their feelings and emotions and feel a greater sense of responsibility both toward themselves and toward the wider world. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And so, you know, His Holiness has been talking about this for a long time. And apparently, as I've heard the story, but, you know, stories, the nature of storytelling is that stories often change. But as I heard the story, His Holiness, who has a long time relationship with Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, with the Emory Tibet Science Initiative, found himself at Emory in 2015 with a group of people that were kind of gathered together. And he said, okay, now it's time. I want you to create this program for schools. And I'll be back in 6 months to see just how far you've gotten. Which apparently he actually did. And so this group of people, including folks in, you know, the fields of education, pedagogy, psychology, neuroscience, and on, you know, including some luminaries in these fields, such as Daniel Goleman and his emotional intelligence crew and others, got to work and created a program that has gone through a number of iterations. It used to be called Secular Ethics in Education. Again, same acronym, SEE. But then at some point that acronym got changed to Social, Emotional, Ethical Learning, Learning, SEE. And in reverse, that's the name of the association that we've created in Italy to bring C learning to Italy, which is Associazione Educazione Etica, ethics, emotiva, emotional, sociale. So, I could talk to you all day about this program. It's really, I find it quite phenomenal because I've seen its iterations over the years. It started out, for those of you who have experience with the Lam Rim and the practices involved in cultivating compassion meditatively, all of that was very transparent and very present in the program from the beginning. And then it went through various iterations in order to become a program more practically applicable in schools with folks who haven't got the same kind of Buddhist background that many of those who are here may have. So, and this is the huge challenge of C learning, is bringing something to the world that the world doesn't necessarily know it wants or needs. In reality, you know, there's a lot of resistance, a lot of difficulties. Pam undoubtedly has an immense amount of experience with all of that resistance and all of those difficulties. We all do in some way. See, learning works on bringing to kids the opportunity to develop, in the easiest sense, 5 different skill areas, 5 different categories, you might say, of inner skills, inner abilities. Inner abilities don't come from nothing. So obviously, I mean, not obviously to everyone, but perhaps to us, as we've been discussing this in such a wonderful way for the last hour plus, you know, we have the seeds of all of these skills within us. All of us. We can't put something in that doesn't already have a basis inside. And so the job is to cultivate. The job is to help to flourish that, in some ways, that which is at least potentially already there. And those 5 skill areas are attention skills, the ability to focus, to be present in life, to not be distracted, to, as William James, the father of modern psychology, even himself said, the ability to actually continue to bring our attention back to an object repeatedly is the basis for the development of good character, the development of good judgment, the development of critical thinking. All of that is first based on being able to develop attention skills, being able to focus. If we can't focus, all of the rest of it becomes extraordinarily difficult. Secondly, resilience skills. Resilience here has a very broad sense. My sense of resilience skills is, how do we deal with adversity? How do we deal with problems in life? How do we deal with suffering and not get overwhelmed? How can we learn to embrace the difficulties of life and have them become something that enriches our life because it gives our life depth, and our experience and way of dealing with difficulty deepens our humanity in the end. But also, resiliency skills here, which are trauma informed, based on the science of trauma, includes what in Sea Learning is called body literacy. Understanding one's own nervous system, understanding when our nervous system is out of kilter, which then affects negatively our mind and our ability to make decisions, and being able to bring ourselves back into balance in terms of also in that basic sense of our nervous system, so that everything else can work better and we can have it have available to us the rest of our inner resources, that when we are out of kilter at that most basic nervous system level, are no longer accessible to us. So helping kids to learn about their own nervous systems and how to regulate them, which then, of course, once we expand that, goes into emotional regulation, how to navigate difficult emotions, how to navigate the world of emotions in general, how to work with risky emotions, how to understand what is a risky emotion and why it's risky, how to identify different kinds of emotions. Again, here we're talking about emotional literacy, which is the third area of cultivating skills within Sea Learning. The fourth, and the root, the heart, is kindness and compassion. And these filter through all the others. So, and I really related fantastically well with what Pam said about how they start with creating compassionate cultures at Tara Redwood School and other contexts where CCC is being used, because of starting with what kind of classroom do we want. Lo and behold, C-learning does exactly the same thing. So minds who think alike. So, kindness and compassion, how do we not impose any of these things in reality, but how do we work with kids so that they start thinking about these things, as Pam said, start asking why and how and what, and is this important, and well, gee, maybe it is and I never thought it was, and and why do I want people to treat me good, and why aren't I treating other people good like I would like to be treated, and gee, maybe something can change here. All of those things, So kindness and compassion runs through the entire program. And the fifth area of skills that is focused on in C-learning is systemic thinking, and which is very clearly related to understanding interdependence. And as we've talked about, as all of those things are woven together, are integrated together, so we're not doing just one without the others. We're always emphasizing one a bit more, and all the others are a part of what we're doing. Then slowly, what happens is flourishing of those skills, cultivating those skills, and flourishing of human beings in their humanity. This is the object. Having an objective and then having a starting point and seeing the distance between the starting point and the objective, obviously, then we come down to how do we do this? The how of it. It's lovely to have all the objectives. It's, and it's good to be honest about where we're at. And then there's the road that we travel. And in many ways, the road that we travel as an organization seeking to introduce at least the possibility of this program into not only schools, but educational contexts, wherever they might be, after school programs, summer programs, any kind of, community center situations and so on. Well, the part of the road is the adults, coming back to the teacher, coming back to the parents, and where are we at? Where is our starting place? And again, I go back to that phrase, we are all teaching in every moment. We are teaching how we've been conditioned, and passing on that conditioning, especially if we're not aware of that conditioning in ourselves. So C-learning isn't just for kids. From my perspective, first and foremost, it's for teachers. And then, if we're all teachers, then it's for all of us, And His Holiness's idea, His Holiness's vision was very much rooted in the idea that all of us as human beings, every single one of us, apart from all of those divisions that we tend to want to set up of either nationality or especially of religion, but we all need kindness. We all want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. We all, I think, want to live together in harmony. And part of the way to do that, perhaps the way to do that, is to learn how to treat each other, to not harm, And if we can possibly, every once in a while, help, that's great. But at the very least, do not harm. And that comes from ethics. That comes from a sense of harming and empathy with others, and how do I behave? How do I act? On what basis do I make choices in my actions, in how I treat other beings? And all of these things, attention skills, how I deal with adversity and difficulty in moments of, problems, how I work with my emotions, how self-regulated I'm able to be, how much kindness and compassion I've been able to cultivate and put into practice and live in my life. And how do I think about the connections? How do I relate to all of the interconnections between myself and others? All of those things contribute to our ethics, our view of our place in this world, and how we relate to others. See, learning is a complex system. I can tell you from firsthand experience, you want to go into a school and take a mindfulness in schools, program into schools with 8 weeks of 2 times a week. And after 8 weeks, you're done and you walk, you kind of walk away. And, if the school hangs on to it, that's great. And if it doesn't, oh well. And that's generally how it works for many, at least here in Italy, it certainly is, even with serious teachers for mindfulness in schools. See, learning isn't like that. It's much more complicated, as I have no doubt that Pam knows with creating compassionate cultures. What we offer, these kinds of programs, are very complex, and they require a level of commitment and dedication and complexity from those who are putting them into practice, who are using them in their classrooms or in their learning environments. And that means commitment to individual change of oneself, first and foremost. It's a huge thing on the one hand, it's a huge thing we're offering to people. I believe, I believe in my heart. It is an enormous thing that we're offering, but it's also an enormous thing that we're asking to people. That level this is not easy. This is conquering one teacher, one parent at a time, often. And, one by one, hey, up we go, up the mountain. Another, one last thing that occurs to me, that's 2 last things that occur to me, actually. The first is, again, with regard to what it means to teach. Coming back to that image, which from when I was in my 20s, that image that we are not here to pour things into empty vessels. We are here to bring out and help flourish what is already there, as developed or as yet undeveloped, and that's okay. A.S. Neal, apparently super incredible guy, who started Summerhill in England, an alternative school back last century, wrote a book about his experience at Summerhill. One of my dearest friends here in Italy actually grew up and went to Summerhill. And I found that out in one conversation with her that was fascinating, frankly. But he wrote, when I read his book, again, one of those things that got stamped on my brain was, he said, people don't learn unless they are seeking answers to their own questions. Not your questions, their questions. And so what's the job of a teacher? Help kids find their questions, encourage their curiosity, help them find their questions and then go after the answers. That's all. That's enough. And personally, as a teacher of adults, that has helped me immensely to remember that I'm not the source of all information or the source of perhaps anything. I'm just here to help you find your questions. So, the last thing I wanted to share was one last, I'm not being very organized today. I apologize. It's a little like there's so much, and sometimes it's really difficult to put it all in order. We are facing in Italy an enormous crisis in schools, but in the family, in society, in this little tiny country. Suicides among young people in Italy since the pandemic went up 20%. 20%. 20% of Italian adolescents show tendencies towards self-harm in various forms. That's 1 out of 5. And in young people from the age of 10 to the age of 25, suicide is the second most frequent cause of death. These are alarming numbers. I don't think this country is alone in this kind of statistic by any means. Kids are crying out for help. To help them understand what they're experiencing inside of themselves, to help them deal with their own emotions and their own fears in a world that is just so confusing and full of violence and a lack of understanding. And this is why we do what we do. I think this is why every single person who I'm looking at on this screen does what you do in your life, because of this level of suffering at all ages in this world. So thank you. Thank you. Ralph Waldo Emerson, great American poet laureate during his lifetime, if I remember correctly, which was many, many, many decades ago. But he said, the great teacher is not the person who supplies us with the most facts, but the one in whose presence we become better people. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Venerable Connie, for sharing. I just wanted to move on to the discussion panel now and bring up some of the themes that you were speaking about, Venerable Connie. When we speak about the crisis on mental health amongst young people and the high suicide rates, we see clearly the problem. And you also touched on the resistance, the fact that it's so difficult to get educators, schools to teach these things like mindfulness, compassion, values. Pam, can I ask you, what's your journey been like in terms of trying to meet that resistance, and how do you keep going in the face of it?
Yes, it's a tough one. Of course, I think the most powerful influence for the child, first and foremost, is the home. So parents, generally speaking, they want to they're not averse to it, you know, but they want to, of course, make sure that their children are also getting the academics, which we want to also provide that in the classroom as well. But I think it's a lack of time. I think we live in a very, very busy world. And so people may have the intention even to attend this program, for instance, you know, they want to have more compassion in their lives, but actually to set aside the time, ooh boy, that is a rare commodity, actually. That is very rare. So time is one thing, right? And I think that's a big one right there. People want quick fixes. They don't want to spend a lot of time spent, you know, really going into these topics more deeply. They don't necessarily have the time to rearrange and reconstruct their home situation. You know, they're just trying to get through the day, you know, get their children up and clothed and fed, and off they go to work or to work out. That's the society pretty much that we live in now. And people are being bombarded. We all are, all ages, with information, with distraction, phones in our hands, computers on all the time, computers in our pockets, in essence. So I think that's a big piece of it, honestly. Things are moving so fast. In the classroom, the other thing is, of course, the teachers. Teachers having to take that on. In public schools, for instance, teaching to the test has become a much more, you know, intense aspect of education. Different reasons for that, but really trying to keep up with the nations, the different nations and education systems around the world, you know. I mean, Asian education and those educated in Asia with that certain way of thinking are really taking over a lot of the work here, you know, in this country, a lot of the jobs. And so there's a lot of competition in the workforce, a lot of competition in the workforce, as there is, of course, we know about, you know, where most of our goods are being produced, right? And what that does for local businesses, etc. So I think the shift in the economy and the workforce in this global community we live in now is complicated. So how do we teach to the needs of not only the individual and developing these soft skills, as they call them, those inner qualities and that awareness, and also, you know, keep up with the economic demands and the demands out there. You have to survive, you have to make money, right? So that's become much more competitive, I believe. So I think those are elements for teachers to put their time into it. They're overwhelmed with just trying to teach to the test, provide the education so kids can pass the tests at a certain level, right? Otherwise, they lose funding if their kids are not producing and you know, learning at that level. So a lot of stress, a lot of requirements. We actually have a deficit. We can't find teachers in this country. I think that's pretty much globally been the trend for a lot of different reasons that I think, you know, Andy might have mentioned, or you mentioned about, you know, the Kabir had mentioned about low salaries. You know, teachers are not paid as well, and they're not paid enough to survive in the present, you know, economy that we live in. So what are they going to do? They're going to leave. It's also stressful there, trying to meet those goals in the classroom. Otherwise, the school loses funding. There's pressure there. It's a complex situation, especially since COVID, right? Teachers, you couldn't find teachers. In fact, you couldn't find people for a lot of different, you know, jobs. And so I think that's been, those are some of the things. Anyways, I think that's what we struggle against to a great degree. I think teachers and parents would say, oh, yes, I want my children to be kind. Absolutely. But they can't make time somehow for developing that and to focus on those qualities, developing those inequalities. Too many pressures. Big problem.
Like a crisis of meaning for everyone, really, but particularly it's impacting the younger generation. I mean, Andy, do you want to come in and say something about that? When people feel hopeless, particularly children and young people feeling their life is worthless, there's no meaning in their life, nothing that they do has any impact, they're totally overwhelmed by what they see on social media or the news. What ways do you think we can counter that sense of meaninglessness? My life is worthless.
I think meaning is derived from interaction, from relationship, and so community is a very big part of the solution. And that plays out in different ways for different age groups. In some cases, it you know, gangs and things are communities, and we need to understand what is going on when people join gangs in their teens. I'm just thinking about my 4-year-old grandson who is learning to grow food because his parents have an allotment. You know, it's a kind of place where you can grow, and they take him there every weekend, and they're growing. And actually, who knows what might be necessary in 20 years' time when he's an adult. Maybe there won't be any food in the shops. Maybe those skills will be needed. So, you know, to me, and there's a lot of meaning to be derived from learning to grow food, actually. You know, it's contact with the earth, and it's an understanding of where your food comes from. And it's that separation which is the problem to me. It's the culture is dreadful. In this country, the schools are falling apart, literally physically, but also the system is falling apart. I mean, what happens when it falls apart? Kids stop going, that's one thing. Teachers resign because they're being attacked. There's online misogynistic, pornographic materials which are flooding young people's minds. I mean, you know, it's bad. So the way through is to give meaning, to me, outside the school. I really feel that community, youth work, and that kind of thing often offers the best opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And Ven Connie, can I bring you in on this point as well? What do you feel is the best way to give children and young people meaning in their life? Community?
I think that's a huge part. Connection. I think it all comes back to connection, frankly, in whatever context. If kids feel disconnected from their families, disconnected from their community, disconnected from their peer group, I mean, I think disconnection is at the root of all of those statistics. You know, it's at the root of the fact that depression and anxiety in the world today are the #1 cause of death, and far outreaching cancer and heart disease. You know, disconnection. And so anything that we can do that helps kids rediscover, helps people at all ages, not just kids, but you know, we're not going to have a next generation if we don't focus on kids. So, but anybody to rediscover connection with others, interrelationships, friendships. It's the #1 thing in every single study on happiness, you know, that pretty much anybody has ever done, is relationships with others. That's, you know, all the rest pales in comparison. So you know, focusing on that, focusing on how we are connected with others and fostering those connections. I was talking to my own nephew earlier this afternoon, whose son is in his first year at university, and he's shy. So he's far away from home and having difficulty making friendships. And at the same time, this context is the context in which he's got the most possibility to create connections with his peer groups, because he's surrounded by others who are in the same boat that he is. And so, you know, we're doing kind of anything we can to encourage him to step out of his room, get his nose out of his books or his cell phone, and make friends, talk to people, join a group, whatever, even if it's difficult at the beginning, because those friendships are what are going to endure through his life, hopefully. So.
Can I open it up to questions from others in the group? Is there anybody else who has a question? Please just raise your hand with the icon, or any of our speakers, any topic you'd like to see touched on or expanded on what you've heard so far. Anybody with a question? Maybe we can move on to, yes, question.
Okay. Yes. The little reflection that we did when, after I gave my little talk, I have become very, very aware over these years, and actually even when I first was starting the school, at the power that the parent has to be able to provide, this foundation in values, let's say, and bringing them into the home. We know in this, as I mentioned, Yuri Bronfenbrenner, bioecological systems theorist, was this developmental psychologist, through the 70s, 80s. He died in 90s, passed away. But he had this talk about interconnection, this map and this approach to the systems that exist within our world that have become much more tightly connected. So kids are connecting, but how are they connecting? What is it that is grabbing most kids' attention? There's a great, documentary called The Social Dilemma. I don't know who has seen it, but if you have not seen it, it's worth looking at. And inspired by this young tech engineer, Tristan Harris. And he became very alarmed working in tech at Google. He attended Stanford for this course in influencing engineering and materials and programs, how to influence people. And he came out of that program completely shocked and dedicated to trying to create what he called humane technology. So it's true. I mean, I've got this saying, who's raising our children? I mean, really, who's raising our children? Who's raising our children? The internet, advertising technology, and I'm not saying it's all bad, but how and what is influencing our children, the children today, and the young adults today? I mean, technology too can really lead them down this path. For instance, there's this little dopamine effect that they get when somebody likes something on their Facebook or Instagram, okay? If they're not getting that dopamine effect, they're going to feel pretty bad about themselves. I'm failing. Hey, nobody likes me. I mean, it's a huge issue. It's a huge problem. Where is the guidance? Who's raising our kids? It has to start. It has to be at home and then in our educations. So kids are connecting. They're connecting. But what are they connecting over? What are the messages? What are the conversations they're having? Big, big problem. This cyberbullying too happens there or online. So it's a big issue that I think we have to, and we as parents and we as educators, we as adults and we as guides have to really think, how can we bring these values into our home, into our workplace, into the classrooms, and into our personal lives? Because as Connie said, and said, we're teaching every moment. We are impacting to varying degrees those around us, those we meet, those at the checkout counter at the supermarket. We're interacting, we are connected.
Absolutely.
How are we connecting?
Yeah, I see a question here from Denise. Denise, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
It wasn't so
Hello
much a
from
question,
Northern
just an
California.
observation. Yeah, just an observation that another way to help
Oh, other
young
Denise.
people connect might be through work.
Okay, I think there are two Denises. That's what's happened. So I think Denise.
Apologies.
There's also another Denise called Denise Smith. Would you like to unmute and ask a question?
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for your talks today. Nice to see you and all the different angles. And congratulations on being a new grandma, Pam. I just did a collective trauma summit with Thomas Hubel, and he had 60 speakers in there from different angles talking about how to deal with collective trauma. One of those was Randima Fernando, who spoke of his experience working in technology at NVIDIA, which is right here in Silicon Valley. And he said very clearly that it is technology owns our awareness now. They own it so specifically that they own parts of our mind that they want to own. So within that, we must, he said, even the most aware, mindful practitioner cannot counter what is being owned with technology. And the only way to really mitigate that is to step away from the technology, to step away from the fight. And so I'm going to put his website in the chat right here. He left NVIDIA and he's now running a humane technology. I think one of his websites is like humane technology, just like Pam was saying. And when we start seeing it from that standpoint, and considering that this generation of children that we're trying to get to now is the generation that was raised by the families. I have a 12-year-old who were the first generation of social media. We were in the wow and ooh, and we were caught in it ourselves. And so we missed one of these fundamental, if we weren't catching ourselves and being aware, right? We were stuck on the dopamine ourselves. We missed this fundamental Thomas Hubel comment of attunement with our children. We missed the eye-to-eye limbic resonance, right, Pam? Isn't that what Karuna's sister talks about? The limbic resonance between our body and another body, because we put this block in between that. And yes, at certain levels, we can come back with Zoom and we can be together, but it's not the same as being present with another body and feeling what we cannot see. And we have to bring back an understanding of what these children are missing that we cannot see and we cannot necessarily measure with a spreadsheet. You know, I finally got into a corporation, a giant corporation, to teach a compassion class recently. And immediately they said it went absolutely fantastically. Everything came back 8 to 10. I really needed that. My body felt great. This was amazing. This was for 53 sales managers at a real estate company in Silicon Valley. And 2 hours later, they called to cancel my program because it was too personal. And that's where Pam was going with time, has so much to do with that. And I think our solution becomes really giving these engineer minds, the people who are running the technology, the evidences of what's going on when we teach compassion. If suicide rates are going down in the schools that are teaching compassion, we must announce that loud and clearly. because we can all talk and think, but if we don't actually show them to the point where they say, okay, we'll make the time, we're not going to get there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you
you.
for that. Can I turn to our panelists just for a final thought? I'm conscious of time. We're kind of at the end of our program now, but can you just share a few words about whether you feel hopeful for our children and future generations? And be honest, you know, I'm not asking you to put a spin on anything. Andy, can I start with you first?
Yeah, I'll be honest, as you requested. I think that an awful lot of kids are being so messed up that actually they're going to grow up, I want to say dangerous, difficult, and traumatized. But I think that there is a possibility of some children growing up well and healthy, and it's possible that they can have a considerable impact if they've really worked on themselves. And to me, that's where we might have some effect.
Thank you. Venerable Connie, do you have any thoughts on, are you hopeful?
If I sit with my own thoughts, I have to admit, not so much. Sometimes I need to hear other perspectives, you know. And I'm always very curious about the fact that when His Holiness speaks about optimism, he always says that he's very optimistic, that he's very hopeful. And so, you know, given who His Holiness is and the role he's played in my life, it's always it's a push, it's a nudge to go, okay, so if he's saying this, he has to have a reason why he feels that way. Let me delve deeper. And when I do, you know, then obviously, you know, certain things that are bigger, you know, even statistics come up. You know, the world has in general radically changed its view of war, despite it doesn't live it very well, as we can see even since yesterday. But you know, what's okay and what's not okay in war, in a great sense, has changed radically for at least many people, if not everyone. That's a plus. That's a big plus. We're not living our values, and we are losing them in some cases, and that's worrisome. That's very worrisome. I worry about kids. I see, and at the same time, I see, you know, some kids doing amazing things in the world. You know, Greta Thunberg and the kids who came out of the Parkland High School massacre, who are going on to work hard at trying to make American society more peaceful, less violent, and, you know, and are smart kids and really working on themselves while they also work on societal change. So although, you know, inside I might, you know, find myself in a funk of pessimism, you know, at the same time, when I, you know, lift my head up and look around and, you know, start to notice and stop reading newspapers and so on, you know, then, you know, at an individual level, then I think there's an immense amount to have optimism about. So,
Thank
a
you.
little contradictory, but hey.
Pam, you feeling hopeful?
Well, I think I sort of echo what Andy and Connie have said. sometimes I do not feel so hopeful, but I know through difficulty and as things get sort of darker, like the environmental issues, young people, a lot of young people feel very motivated to make a change there. So it's almost like, and now, of course, you know, guns in schools over here in this country, out of control, right? I can't give you the latest statistics on how many kids have been, you know, killed in schools in this year. But it's a lot. It's way too many. One is too many. So young people are rising up against this. They are, and they've got strong voices and they've got energy and they want to see change. And that gives me hope. And there are a lot of, and that's happening, you know. So the young people, yes, and saying enough, enough. You know, what are you doing to this world and to humanity, to life? So they're seeing that, and it's growing more and more. But unfortunately, it's very often how we learn, isn't it? Through the hardship, you know. We have to go through the hardship in order to gain those deeper realizations and the motivation for change. So I feel hopeful in that way. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers. Amazing presentations. I'm so moved by what you've shared. And I hope everyone on this session has enjoyed it as much as I have. And I would also like to invite you to stay on, because I believe Venerable Connie is going to lead a guided self-compassion practice. Is that right, Connie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you'd like to stay on for that, great. If not, then goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing. Thank you. So please start whenever you feel ready, Venerable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So again, I'm going to just invite everyone to find a comfortable position for you. You know, so you feel at ease. You can leave your eyes open if you prefer. It's not necessary to close your eyes. If that helps you to go inward more easily, then that's fine. But if it's uncomfortable in any way, it's important for you to feel comfortable. So all of us in life encounter difficulty. The first noble truth of the Buddha is suffering, that suffering exists, and it's a part of our human condition. I know for many of us who lived through the pandemic and lockdown and all of that, that was a particularly stressful time, painful for many of us, and some of us may still have lingering effects from that period and how it impacted us. But we all experience grief and heartbreak. We all experience insecurity, anxiety at some time or another. We all experience difficult emotions at some time or another. And the fact is that all of these things are completely natural. There's not something wrong with us because we have difficulty. So this practice is one that can help us, rather than struggling against these emotions, these inner difficulties that we experience in life. Rather than adding suffering on top of suffering when we judge ourselves for these things. This practice can help us to learn to be understanding, to take care of ourselves when we need taking care of. To approach ourselves with kindness and compassion. So I'm going to invite you to bring up in your mind, to remember in some way a moment of difficulty in your own life, a moment in which you felt challenged, in which you experienced some kind of distress or pain. And let yourself remember that moment and feel how you felt in that moment. Feel the emotions that arose within you. Feel your body and how your body reacted. The sensations, maybe tightening in your heart or in your belly, tension, whatever those sensations were, whatever those emotions were, just let them arise. Allow yourself to feel them. Allow yourself to just accept this experience as it is, without fighting against it. To recognize very simply that this is a moment of suffering that you're experiencing. And you can say this to yourself very gently, putting into words internally this recognition. This is a moment of suffering. Very simple. Identifying the experience for what it is. And this is the first step in this practice. And as we move forward, we can also say to ourselves and recognize that suffering is a part of life. It's a part of our human condition. And it's something that everyone experiences. Sometimes when we're having a difficult time, we feel like nobody can possibly understand us, that we're all alone in our pain. And although we do feel this way, it's actually not true. This is part of our common humanity. without feeling guilty or ashamed, without judging ourselves. We can simply recognize that suffering is a part of life. And you can say this to yourself: I'm not alone in this experience. Difficulty is a part of the human condition. And at this point, we allow our caring nature to come to the fore, to care about ourselves when we feel bad. Hopefully to care about ourselves all the time. But when we're having difficulty, when we're just really having a hard time, rather than beating ourselves up about it, we can offer to ourselves just some small gesture of kindness, of understanding. If you feel like doing something like giving yourself a hug, or placing your hand on your heart, or giving yourself a caress, touch is powerful. In whatever way you feel like expressing kindness toward yourself in this difficult moment, then feel free to do so. And send yourself a little kindness, like when we practice Tonglen. We are all suffering in one way or another. We're not better, we're not worse, we're just like everybody else. And we deserve kindness as much as anyone. So whenever you're having a dark moment, a moment of pain or distress or confusion or difficulty of whatever kind, see if you can give yourself the gift of self-compassion. Just a moment of understanding. And by doing so, then maybe you can feel just a little more connected, like we spoke about. A little more tenderness, a little more solace when you're hurting. You can bring yourself kindness in those very moments when you need it most. So instead of anesthetizing, as we so often do, or struggling, or shutting down, self-compassion actually helps us to develop courage in the face of our difficulties, to be able to face them and still be kind to ourselves, even when things are really difficult. So if you feel like it, take a very deep, slow, cleansing breath. You can move your body, stretch your muscles if you feel like it, and we'll conclude the practice here.
Thank you so much, Venerable Chloe, for sharing that. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining this session. We've reached the end. The next session is tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, British summertime. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye. Thank you.